We will now discuss underextrusion. Underextrusion occurs when resistance in the plastic material feeding system limits the rate at which the nozzle can dispense plastic. This leads to visible gaps and straining on the roofs of our printed parts. Underextrusion can also be identified by a clicking noise coming from the left side of your printer, which indicates that the plastic extruder cannot overcome the level of resistance in the feeding system. There are several sources of resistance leading to underextrusion. For example, loosely wound plastic material protruding past the walls of the spool or tangling around the spindle. Material exiting from the bottom of the plastic spool and causing friction at the dry box adapter. Desiccant packs rubbing against the plastic spool. Twists or bends in the plastic load tube creating excess friction with the plastic material. Worn out plastic tubes, or worn out dry box adapter. This utility will prompt you to examine and change the components in the plastic material feeding system. In between each prompt, the printer will run an extrusion check to evaluate whether your troubleshooting actions have improved the printer's extrusion. Each check will heat up the plastic material nozzle, home the print head to the back right corner of the print chamber, and extrude approximately 0.25 cubic centimeters of plastic material. Before running the underextrusion utility, you will want to complete these basic setup checks every time that you suspect you may have underextrusion. Number 1. Open the dry box to check for tangled or unspooling plastic material. You will want to respool any material that has become tangled in the dry box. Number 2. Ensure that the plastic material feeds over the top of the material spool. If the spool is feeding from upside down with the material coming up to the adapter from the bottom of the dry box, simply remove the material and the spindle, flip it over, and then reinstall it. Number 3. You'll want to check that there are an appropriate number of desiccant packs and that the packs lay flat against the bottom of the dry box and are not rubbing against your spool. Number 4. If the plastic feed tube appears twisted or bent, ensure that the dry box location allows for an easy path between the dry box and the printer and does not force the plastic feed tube to twist or bend. If the feed tube still appears bent, unload the plastic to ensure the plastic filament itself has not been twisted. Once you have finished checking for basic setup errors, ensure that your dry box is closed and fully latched. Now we want to verify that our print bed is clean and clear of debris. We will then apply a fresh layer of glue as shown to ensure the purge line adheres properly. We will now navigate to the underextrusion troubleshooting utility. We will select Menu, Utilities, Maintenance, Extrusion Maintenance, Underextrusion Troubleshooting. This utility will start with a purge line to ensure that there is no wet plastic to affect the results of the underextrusion test. You may skip this purge line if the utility allows. Note: when the skip button is not available, you must run the purge line since your printer has been idle for long enough to potentially have wet plastic around the plastic extruder. Clear the purge line from the print bed when it completes and push the print bed to the bottom of the stage. Only use the skip ahead selection if you have been told by later instructions to do so. This function allows you to exit the utility if consumables are not on hand and resume at the point in which the utility was closed. If using the skip ahead function, replace any necessary components before resuming the utility. For example, if you exit the utility while waiting for a replacement part, you will replace the part once it arrives, restart the utility, and then select that replacement part from the skip ahead section. After the purge line, the utility begins with the initial extrusion check, which evaluates whether the printer shows symptoms of underextrusion. Each subsequent extrusion check will run through the same steps as the initial extrusion check to evaluate whether the printer's extrusion has improved. If so, the clicking from the extruder will slow or stop altogether. Every time the utility runs an extrusion check, you will be asked whether you hear clicking from the plastic extruder. Selecting yes will let you continue troubleshooting. Selecting no will exit the utility. Selecting Retry will extrude additional plastic material. If clicking has stopped, but your printed part still shows sign of underextrusion, you should contact support with a picture of your part and the printer logs. If the clicking noise goes away after changing a component, it usually means that was the source of resistance, and that source has now been eliminated. If the clicking decreases but does not completely disappear, you will need to continue troubleshooting workflow to locate and fix any other causes of underextrusion. Replacing plastic material. This utility will follow the same steps as the unload and load plastic utilities, but will only allow you to reload the same type of material that was previously loaded. Before discarding any unloaded material, record the spool ID located on the barcode sticker on the material spool. This is starting with an AX0 or an X0. If the utility does not improve the quality of underextrusion, please provide the spool ID of the discarded material to Markforged support. Replacing worn plastic tubes. In this utility, you will be asked whether you have a spare plastic Bowden tube or plastic load tube on hand. If you do, select Yes and complete the following steps. You will select Retract to pull the plastic material out of the printhead and Bowden tube. You will then proceed with the Bowden tube replacement. At this time, you will also replace the plastic load tube. When you have finished, select Reload to load material back into the printhead and continue the utility. If you do not have a plastic Bowden tube on hand or cannot perform this replacement at this time, you may exit the utility here. When you are ready to replace plastic feed tubes, complete the replacement first, then restart the utility. After printing the purge line, select Skip Ahead and then Plastic Tubes. This will bring you back to the utility. Replace dry box adapter. In this utility, you will be asked whether you have a replacement A2 steel dry box adapter on hand. If you do, select Yes and complete the following. Select Retract to unload plastic material from the printhead and Bowden tube. Pull the material back into the dry box. You will then replace the dry box adapter. When you have finished, select Reload on the printer's touchscreen and load the material back into the printhead and continue the utility. If you do not have an A2 steel adapter on hand or cannot perform this replacement at this time, select No to exit the utility here. When you are ready to replace the dry box adapter, complete the replacement and restart the utility. Again, we will print the purge line and select Skip Ahead and then dry box adapter to bring us back to where we left off. If you have completed the underextrusion utility and still see signs of underextrusion, or if you've been instructed to contact support at any time during this utility, please follow the following guidelines to resolve your issue as quickly as possible. Number 1. Submit a ticket at Markforged support at mlc-cad.com and input all device information as necessary. Attach an image of the part or parts where you are seeing the underextrusion. Include pictures of the part from multiple angles if possible. Supply the current material spool ID of plastic material loaded into your printer and any spool IDs that you have recorded while replacing material. And then attach the printer's logs.